Now moving to the substance of our symposium. As I introduce the panel members, would they please come forward and be seated? Our first panel will examine and discuss the concept of the unitary executive as articulated by the Bush administration. How did this broad interpretation of executive power impact decisions in the global war on terrorism? Our moderator is Colonel Retired David Graham. He has extensive experience in international law. His bio is in your packet, but I want to highlight a few things, as I will do for the other panel members. He has been a professor and chief of the International Law Division at the Army's Judge Advocate General School. Dave was the driving force in creating the concept of operational law that is now universally recognized by all the military forces worldwide. Dave was the chief of international law for the Army on 9/11. He has degrees from the University of Texas, George Washington University, the National War College, and he holds a certificate from the Hague Academy of International Law. He is currently the Executive Director of the Army Judge Advocate General's Legal Center and School in Charlottesville, Virginia. And as a very brief personal note, he has been a friend and an advisor and a mentor of mine for too many years to count.
Too many years.
Too many years. Joining him on the panel is Professor Bob Turner, who co-founded and is currently the director of the Center for National Security Law at the University of Virginia. Bob has extensive experience in international law, both in academia and through several high-level government positions. He has worked in both the executive branch and the legislative branch in areas of national security and intelligence oversight. Bob was the first president of the United States Institute of Peace. He holds a JD and an SJD from the University of Virginia. Professor William Banks is an internationally recognized expert in constitutional law, national security law, and counterterrorism. He has numerous publications in these areas. He is the founding director of the Institute for National Security and Counterterrorism at Syracuse University. He has degrees from the University of Nebraska and the University of Denver. Our last panelist is Professor Sean Watts, who was on the faculty of Creighton University School of Law. Sean served in the Army Judge Advocate General's Corps and was a professor of international law at the Army JAG School. He has degrees from the University of Colorado, William & Mary, and the Army JAG School. Please welcome our panel.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this, the first panel presentation in Washburn University Law School's symposium on the rule of law and, quote, the global war on terrorism. And you're going to note during these 2 days that I'll probably put the global war on terrorism in quotes a good number of times. Before we begin with the panel presentation, let me take just a few moments to both thank and congratulate Dean Tom Romig and the faculty and students of Washburn University Law School for putting together a very topical and a very timely symposium. This symposium is going to be dealing with a lot of very critical issues that are critical to the nation, certainly issues that are critical to the incoming administration. So my thanks and congratulations to all who have labored very long and very hard in putting this symposium together. We look forward to these next 2 days. Now to the panel itself. I think it's fitting, in fact, I think it's absolutely essential that we begin this symposium by focusing on the unitary executive concept. Now, why do I say that? I say that because in my view, and I would hasten to add that these are my views. I don't sit here purporting to represent the views of DOD or DA or the Army's Judge Advocate General's Legal Center and School. But in my view, it's the unitary executive concept, and I'll qualify this very substantively. It's the unitary executive concept as interpreted by and implemented by this particular administration that has really served as the proximate cause for the many legal issues that we have confronted over the last 6 years, many of these unresolvable legal issues. Now, why do I say that? I say that because it is this administration's interpretation and implementation of the unitary executive that has as its very basis the fact that in order to achieve the zenith of presidential power, the president needs to function in his Article II constitutional authority as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. And not only function as Commander-in-Chief, but to reach that zenith, which is what this administration wishes to achieve in terms of unitary executive, that chief executive has to function as Commander-in-Chief during wartime. During wartime. And thus that takes us to the global war on terrorism, because in order to function as a Commander-in-Chief during wartime, obviously you need a war. So thus the global war on terrorism. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm not speaking here in terms of the war in Afghanistan, a legitimate right of self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter, a war, by the way, which was waged against the Taliban government of Afghanistan, not against Al-Qaeda. I'm not talking here about the WMD war of Iraq. I'm talking about the global war on terrorism. I'm talking about this enduring, comprehensive, indefinite, all-encompassing war waged not against a defined enemy, but against a phenomenon. And what better way to achieve that zenith that this administration wishes to achieve in terms of implementing the executive concept, the unitary executive concept, than to be able to wage a war against an undefined enemy, but a phenomenon, and a war that's unending, that's all-encompassing, that's all-enduring. Now, this takes us to the legal issues. If you have a war, you have to apply law to the legal issues that present themselves in the context of that war. And the law that applies to any war is this lex specialis that we call the law of war, or the law of armed conflict. And this is where the problems arise. In attempting to apply the law of war to this, quote, global war on terrorism, the administration has discovered that it simply doesn't fit. The law of war doesn't apply to what are essentially counter and anti-terrorism measures. And in an attempt to make it fit, they have shaped very novel legal issues and very novel legal solutions to those problems. It is akin to attempting to pound square pegs into round holes. The law was never meant to apply to this type of situation. And so in stretching the law of war, in bending the law of war in an attempt to make it fit, they have broken the law of war, both figuratively and literally. They have broken the law of war. They have violated the law of war.